Welcome to today's explainer. We are diving straight into the deep end right off the bat to fix what is honestly one of the most frustrating bottlenecks for automation operators right now, Facebook's CPI integrations, and specifically that absolutely dreaded 400 bad request error inside make.com. If you're an advanced media buyer or an infrastructure operator, you already know the exact headache I'm talking about. Listen, we aren't doing basic marketing theory today. We are doing pure, practical infrastructure fixes. Let's get into it.
We need to establish a core infrastructure rule right away, and it's non-negotiable. Lost tracking equals lost revenue. It really is that simple. If your tracking is broken, your attribution is fundamentally destroyed. The ad platforms are essentially flying blind. Your return on ad spend plummets, and your funnels just bleed cash. In modern scaling, fixing this isn't a nice-to-have, it's a baseline requirement.
So if you're an operator scaling server-side events and you look at your backend right now, is your make.com HTTP module glowing red with a 400 error? Because if it is, let me be super direct with you. Meta's Graph API is actively rejecting your request. You are currently dropping data. Every single time that module hits an error, you're literally losing a conversion signal that you paid very good money to acquire.
Let's compare the two approaches we see out there. The gurus won't tell you this, but the old way, that browser-only pixel-based approach, it's a guaranteed path to broken attribution. Server-side tracking is no longer optional. It is strictly mandatory. Operators who actually understand infrastructure and master server-side data pipelines secure that HTTP 200 OK validation directly from server to server. Because of that, they vastly outperform marketers who are still relying on dying browser pixels.
So what's actually happening when you see that 400 status code? Well, it's an explicit, hard rejection from the MetaGraph API endpoint. And why does it happen? 9 times out of 10, it's triggered because an operator blindly copied a JSON payload example. Maybe they just generated it with ChatGPT without actually understanding strict array structures. Meta's API doesn't guess what you meant to say. It strictly validates every single HTTP post request, and if the payload formatting isn't completely perfect, it fails.
Let's do a quick autopsy on a failed payload. The differences between a malformed structure that fails and a perfect payload that returns a 200 OK are microscopic, but they are absolutely fatal. If you look at the before state, you'll see missing data arrays, plain text emails, standard date formats, totally broken. But look at the after state, valid JSON payload wrappers, carefully trimmed data, SJ256 hashing, and precise Unix timestamps. The difference between these two states? That's the difference between a failing business and a scaling one. Let's break down the most frequent trigger for this failure: a completely invalid JSON structure. And specifically, I'm talking about omitting the mandatory data array wrapper. Your entire event object has to be strictly wrapped inside this array. If it's missing, the API doesn't even try to read it. The request just dies on arrival.
Next up, let's talk about event match quality, or your EMQ scores. This is Meta's standard, and it is ruthless. It dictates that you can absolutely never pass raw, unhashed emails or phone numbers to Facebook. If you send a plain text email in your payload, Meta immediately rejects the entire thing. To satisfy EMQ standards, you must normalize, meaning you lowercase and trim the whitespace, and then securely hash all of that user data. To actually fix this inside make.com, you've got to use this exact string formula. And this isn't a suggestion, it's a structural requirement. You take your email variable, you apply the lower function to make it all lowercase, you use trim to strip out any accidental whitespace from the user input, and finally, you wrap the whole thing in a SHA-256 hash formatted as hex before it ever even hits the Meta Conversions API. That is exactly how you build a resilient pipeline.
Oh, and your timestamp? Yeah, that's probably breaking your payload too. Meta will aggressively reject standard date formats like month, day, and year. The event underscore time parameter must be a precise 10-digit Unix timestamp. To pull this off, you've got to use this specific make.com format date function to convert the current execution time into a compliant Unix string. It seems like a tiny detail, I know, but infrastructure always fails on the tiny details.
Let's walk through the actual make.com HTTP module configuration you need to communicate properly with the Graph API endpoint. First, set your URL to the specific endpoint containing your unique pixel ID and access token. Second, make sure your method is strictly set to post. And third, and guys, this is absolutely critical, you must add a header with the key content type and the value application/JSON. If you skip that header, the destination server is entirely blind to your perfectly formatted payload.
All right,
So the crucial point for production environments, and seriously, pay close attention here, is event ID deduplication. If you're firing events from both the browser pixel and your server-side make.com pipeline, you must pass a matching event ID in your payload. If you skip this step, Meta's going to double count your purchases. It'll look like you made twice as much money as you actually did, which completely destroys your ROAS reporting and absolutely ruins your optimization algorithms.
Before you even think about running that scenario again, run through this checklist. Infrastructure breaks down when we ignore the basics, right? We're talking fatal syntax errors like a single trailing comma. Or lowercase standard event names. Sending a lowercase purchase instead of a capital P purchase will trigger a 400 error instantly. Watch out for empty CRM fields passing blank strings too. You need to catch these things before Meta does. Now, as a high-level operator, you know you never test blindly in production. So follow these steps to use the Test Events tab safely. Open up Meta Events Manager. Copy your unique test_event code and map that code right beneath the action source parameter in your JSON payload. Run the module and use the official Meta payload helper to validate your architecture. But huge warning here, remove that test code before you go live, where Meta will start aggressively rejecting your real production requests. And this right here is what we are fighting for. When your JSON formatting, your data hashing, and your event deduplication are totally flawless, the HTTP module turns green. You receive an HTTP 200 OK status code along with a JSON payload confirming events received. This means your server-side integration is fully operational. You've officially bypassed the dying browser pixel and established a direct, unbreakable data pipeline.
So, as an advanced operator, you face a pretty serious choice right now. Are you going to keep bleeding revenue through broken funnels, or are you ready to fix your attribution permanently? Every single day you run traffic with a red 400 error, you are literally paying ad networks for data that you immediately throw in the trash. Broken attribution destroys optimization. It's time to build proper infrastructure.
Look, you don't need to build this complex architecture from scratch, and honestly, you shouldn't. This JSON fix is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The full pipeline requires webhook capture, duplication, and deep CRM attribution logic. Visit creatoropsmatrix.com/Facebook-CAPI400-bad request right now to download the complete make.com attribution blueprint. Stop losing your revenue to broken pixels and start learning full server-side tracking architecture so you can operate like a true infrastructure expert. But before you go, ask yourself, if your server-side tracking has been leaking this much data today, what other automated pipelines in your business are quietly bleeding cash right now?